What's good, everyone? It's Nigel here, Trinidad Empowerment Network. So, with an election a matter of days away, everything's heating up in Trinidad and Tobago now. And today I wanted to give my side on where things stand and where I see the future of Trinidad and Tobago going. And it's not a great picture, in my opinion. It does not look great. And I don't want to sound like a pessimist, but it does not look great. And I think as Trinidad and Tobago approaches this 2025 general election, we see the political landscape is being marked by uncertainty, right? And the ruling party, the PNM, now under the leadership of Stuart Young, of course, following Keith Rowley, they face some significant challenges. And, we only have to look at what's happening in Trinidad, and it's been happening for the last few years. The crime rate obviously is astronomical, and it needs to be addressed. That should be priority, by the way, for any government. However, it's crucial to understand that many of these challenges are not just unique to Trinidad and Tobago, but are pretty much part of a broader global trend that we've seen happen ever since COVID-19 came upon us. So those who are going to the gas station and crying about the increase in gas prices and blaming obviously the PNM, in many ways, the government of Trinidad has no real control over the prices you pay at the gas station because of what happened globally. America saw the same increases, Britain saw the same increases. So the world has experienced unprecedented economic upheavals in recent years, right? Unprecedented. No one could argue that fact. It's easy for any opposition party to blame the other one, and you see it happen in Britain, you see it happen in America, which ended up in landslide win for Donald Trump, and the British in Britain as well for the current leaders, the Labour Party. So in 2020, lockdowns and disruptions led to a supply chain issue and reduced demand for oil and gas. People didn't need it. We were in lockdown. People didn't need oil and gas as much as they did before, right? And we predominantly sell oil and gas to the rest of the world. That's a crisis for us. So the post-pandemic recovery saw a surge in energy demand outpacing supply. So we went from not supplying anything to seeing a surge, right? This imbalance was exacerbated by the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, the war, Russia-Ukraine. This sort of led to significant disruptions in global energy markets. Significant disruption, the war in Ukraine. The World Bank, in fact, noted that this conflict, this war, caused the largest commodity shock since the 1970s, with energy prices soaring and contributing to global inflation. So you see how Trinidad gets affected by anything to do with energy, because our two main sources of income is gas and oil, which we supply to the rest of the world, mainly America. Anytime the demand for gas and oil is affected, the Trinidad economy is affected. This is a global issue, not so much a local one. So these factors culminated in a global inflation, a surge between 2021 and 2023. We saw an inflation surge affecting both developed and developing nations. For instance, the US experienced its highest inflation rates in decades. And this was driven in part by an increase in energy and food prices. The minute you see an increase in energy and food prices, you see inflation. It sort of goes hand in hand. So what impact has this had on Trinidad and Tobago other than what I've already mentioned? The impact was massive. And it's a great time for any opposition leader to blame the local government for what's going on. When if you don't know what's really going on, you're not in the know. If you're ignorant of the facts, you would do the same. I can see how that happens, right? So Trinidad and Tobago's economy, like I said, is massively reliant on oil and gas. Massively reliant on the oil and gas sector. We need to diversify, guys. And it accounts for 40%, oil and gas accounts for 40% of our GDP. 80% of our exports as well, by the way. So the global energy crisis and fluctuating oil prices have had a pronounced impact on the nation's physical health. A profound effect on it. Additionally, the country's effort to diversify its economy have faced some challenges, which made it more susceptible to any external shocks, anything that happened, pandemics, wars in Ukraine, a lack of demand for what we sell to the rest of the world, which is oil and gas. The minute those are affected, the Trinidad and Tobago's economy is affected. This is why I preach all the time. We need a revolution. We need to change things massively in Trinidad. We need to diversify the economy. And I don't see anything, unfortunately, from either party that really focuses its efforts on really diversifying the economy. They talk about it, but you see nothing happening, really. So given the economic hardships Trinidad faces, there's a growing sentiment among the electorate, of course, to seek change, right? So everyone, this is bad, what's happening, crime is high, can't get jobs. So everyone wants change. Everyone's crying out for change. It's happened everywhere across the world. However, this desire for change doesn't necessarily equate to widespread support for the UNC, right? I don't think, of course, you have the diehards, the people who are always going to support them, irregardless, whether it be race or whatever it is, mainly race, but you're going to have the diehards. But I think it reflects a protest vote, a phenomenon that's happened globally, where voters expressed dissatisfaction with the incumbent government and without a strong endorsement of the alternative. So they're not really going, we really want this other party involved. Like I said, of course, we have the diehards who are always going to, align themselves with whoever, with the affiliated party. But this essentially becomes a protest vote. People are unhappy with what they're currently seeing from the incumbent government. They're unhappy with going to the grocery and seeing groceries costing so much and crime being so high, etc., etc. All the things I've alluded to in the past. You see this repeatedly in Trinidad. You see this repeatedly in America, hence Donald Trump. So the UNC, led by Kamala, they themselves have faced criticism for its leadership approach, right? With some observers, in Trinidad expressing concerns about the party's alignment with certain global political ideologies. Meaning Donald Trump, right? You've seen this woman, talk about Donald Trump and how much she respects him and his anti-woke ideas, etc., etc. It's just ridiculous nonsense. It's embarrassing for this woman to stand up and talk about how she admires this man. This man's an idiot. This man's incompetent. So she's touted this anti-woke idea. And by the way, in the UK and in the US, anti-woke is anti-black. That's what it essentially means. To be anti-woke, if you look up the definition, to be woke is the fight against racism, social injustice, etc. So anyone that's anti-woke is anti that. It doesn't make any sense. But you've seen her tout this nonsense in the past. How could someone like me, that looks like me, align myself with this individual? It's insane. It's insanity. So the political strategies observed in Trinidad for me, and it sort of bears resemblance to exactly those employed in the US. the same thing that Donald Trump did, right? You know, the man is clearly a white supremacist with no question asked, right? But he did have some token representation in his party in the US. So I don't know if you guys pay much attention to the US and their politics. You have people like Byron Donalds, Tim Scott, Ben Carson, names such as those, others I've forgotten. And they've been prominent black Republicans supporting Donald Trump, right? But despite their support, they were notably absent from any significant cabinet positions in Trump's administration, right? So for me, this pattern where you see now with people like Alexander and, you know, Iowa George coming out to support the UNC, it's a pattern here. And this pattern raises concern about this superficial inclusivity without substantive empowerment. They're being used, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. They're being used for who they are and what they look like to get these people in power. And you see the same playbook happening in Trinidad. So cultural symbolism and debates around national symbols, such as proposal to replace Christopher Columbus on Trinidad and Tobago's coat of arms. We've seen her being against that, meaning Kamala, the UNC leader. We've seen her talk about, you know, that's not the good thing and Trinidad history should be left alone. Ridiculous. And that sort of discussion sort of mirrors the similar sort of discussions you see happening in America. So you're seeing the same thing happening in America where people talk about reevaluating historical figures who were white supremacists and getting rid of them. And you see the fight against that by the likes of Donald Trump. So I think sometimes I feel like our history is so, we need to learn our history, quite frankly. We need to understand our history. And the divide that we see in Trinidad, I think a lot of the times is as a direct result of a complete misunderstanding of our history. And people use that as as a tool to get themselves in position. I don't know. The idea that Christopher Columbus was a good man is insanity. Right? But moving on, I almost think regardless of which party assumes power in Trinidad, whichever party assumes power in Trinidad and Tobago requires substantial reform to address these systemic issues that we currently face. Substantial reform. And when I talk about that, I mean, we need, again, I feel like a broken record saying it, but we need a diversification of our economy in Trinidad, ASAP. We need to reduce our dependence on oil and gas, and we need to invest in sectors like agriculture, manufacturing, and renewable energy. No question. We need to do that. And I do not see this happening with this whoever wins the election, unfortunately. I've heard Stuart Young talk about it. I think a vote for the UNC is to take us backwards, similar to what you see happening in America right now. It's going to take us backwards. It's going to take us backwards. I also think in Trinidad, transparency is needed. Anti-corruption measures is needed. We need to implement policies to ensure accountability in government and public spending. We need to know what's going on. The public, remember, the public, put these people in charge, right? You are essentially their bosses. As much as they would never admit, you are their bosses. You put them in charge. So it's on you to hold them accountable. The fact that they're able to get away with some of the things they do, it's insane to me. We need to address the disparities happening in Trinidad, ensuring that all communities have equal opportunities for growth and development. Every community in Trinidad. I'm going to conclude by saying this. The upcoming election is a pivotal moment for Trinidad and Tobago. A pivotal moment. We've seen the world literally changing in front of our very eyes, almost on a daily basis. We see this new world order changing. And whilst the global economy, whilst there are challenges with the global economy, which has undeniably impacted Trinidad, I believe the path forward requires introspection, unity, and a commitment to comprehensive reform in Trinidad and Tobago. Voters are encouraged to consider not just the desire, or I would encourage you to consider not just the desire for change, but a vision and policies that will help shape the future of Trinidad and Tobago. And sadly, I do not see, I don't want to sound too dramatic here, but I almost feel like there needs to be a revolution in Trinidad and Tobago. We need to wipe the slate clean and start again. And I'm not seeing that unfortunately, from the two-party system that we have in Trinidad. I believe whoever comes in as the next leader of Trinidad, the next government, if it is the UNC, I believe it's a step backwards for Trinidad. I believe what's likely to happen in this election is going to be nothing but a protest vote for the UNC. We've seen that happen across the world to incumbent government. We've seen it happen in the UK. We've seen it happen in the US. And we're now seeing the result of that protest vote, especially so in the US. They have made their lives worse. And I do not want the same thing for Trinidad. Unfortunately, this is what's likely to happen. People are voting with their heart and not their heads. People are voting with their heart and not their heads. And I could understand, if you're not thinking logically, if you're voting out of protest, and normally protest is anger, right? Protest is anger. If you're voting out of anger, you are likely to go and vote for the UNC, but they are lying to you. These people are lying to you. They are selling you a false hope. We've seen it on display with America. We've seen it on display with Donald Trump. Do not fall for it. But, the alternative is the PNM. And if they do retain power, which I don't know how likely that is, if they do retain power, Stuart Young and his MPs needs to be held to account. Trinidad needs to do better. I've talked about what we need to do. We need to diversify. We need to tax the rich. We need to tax foreign investors in our country heavily. We need to know about all the foreign investors in our country. We need to know about every single foreign investor in Trinidad. From Proman, to BP, to Shell, you name it. We need to know how much money they make, how many billions they make a year, and how much of that money is put back into the Trinidad economy. These are the things we need to know. We need transparency from our government, and we do not have it, unfortunately. These are the real substantial change we need to see. And once we start doing that and taxing these people and getting the wealth back into the country rather than leaving the country for offshore account, we need to kill corruption. And that money needs to be invested back into the Trinidad economy to build wealth, to empower the people of Trinidad, to empower the youngsters of Trinidad, to have them stay in Trinidad, to build a life for themselves rather than look to go elsewhere. We have some brilliant people in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean, all seeking alternatives, all seeking to go elsewhere because the economy is that bad. We need to grow our economy, keep the money within Trinidad, don't have that money leaving the country, end corruption, and that's the only way we make Trinidad better. From crime to you name it, this is the only way. This is the way forward. We have to. We've got no real choice. This is real change. This is the sort of change we have to advocate for in Trinidad. So this party politics nonsense and, some 73-year-old woman coming into power with old draconian ideas. I've seen this woman even talk about bringing back the death penalty. Come on. I know that's a controversial topic, but that is essentially taking us back. That's taking us backward. She has no real ideas, and we need to do better. And for those people of, a certain origin that comes onto this page to try and attack me, I could care less about what you. I don't know if you think someone's worried about you in some way. No one's worried about you, my friend. You can say what you want. Half the time, I'm deleting some of the stuff you put on there anyway. If you come on here with your nonsense racist attack, your weak ass attack that you wouldn't dare to say to me if you were stood in front of me, you're a coward. You're a coward, and your message or your comments are only going to get deleted. That's just a personal thing for me. But anyway, we need to go out and vote. We need to make the right choice, and I hope this video has helped you in doing so. And I'll see you guys on my next video. For now, much love. Take care. God bless.